Welcome to Therapy in the Great Outdoors, a podcast about the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy of all kinds. If you are a nature-loving therapist who works with children, this podcast will help you start taking your work outdoors into nature and help you grow a profitable nature-based therapy practice or program that connects children to nature and changes their lives and yours forever. I'm your host, the ever honest, always 100% real, Laura Park Figueroa. I have been a pediatric occupational therapist for over 20 years. But 7 years ago, I almost left the field entirely. I was so burned out. And nature-based therapy is what saved me. It reignited my love of my work, and I saw profound changes in the children that I was working with. I'm the founder of Outdoor Kids OT and the creator of the TGO approach, an evidence-based framework for nature-based pediatric therapy services. I've helped dozens of pediatric therapists start and grow successful nature-based practices through my business coaching and online programs, the latest of which is the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community, TGO for short. TGO is an online membership site with loads of resources to support you every step of the way as you start and grow your nature-based therapy work. You can find out more at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. Working outdoors with children can be a wild ride. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's jump in. Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 6 of Therapy in the Great Outdoors. This has been a crazy week in the life of my business. The news is that we are, in my practice, building a group registration application platform within our EMR, which is Therabyte. We love them so much. And it has just been a big week because we launched the beta, it's really a fully functioning version of the software, and invited all our families and our wait list and the community to apply for the spots that we have in our groups for next year. And then this week was when we were sorting all the kids into groups and emailing families about their placements. And it's just a really busy time, but I am so excited to say that this software is just truly going to save so much time in our practice, and I cannot wait for them to make it available to any of you who run groups in your business. It is just going to save you so much time with reviewing applications and sorting kids into groups in a way that is very intentional and thoughtful, because when we run therapy groups, we want them to be balanced. We want the kids to fit well together and for there to be a good group vibe in the group. And so this new software is just going to be incredible. I just want to give a shout out to the team at Therabyte because they have been so fabulous to work with. And yeah, so it's just been a busy time for me. So a little change that I'm going to do starting with this episode. So if you've listened to, at time of this recording, I've done 5 episodes. And if you've listened to those episodes, you know that I've been doing at the beginning of them a 2-minute takeaway, where I review an article and I talk to you about how that research article applies to our work as nature-based pediatric therapists. And what I found this week when I chose an article was that there was a lot more to say about this article than just a 2-minute little takeaway. So I think what I may start doing in the future is to do an episode that has the article review and then do an episode that is a topic-based episode or an interview or something like that to support your work in your nature-based practice. So, well, what I'm finding when I do these research reviews is that I want to be able to go a little bit more into detail about it, to share a little bit more about it. And this article in particular was one that I really need to do that with. So the article for this week that this episode will be all about, I'm hoping it will be about 10 minutes, might be a few minutes longer. This article this week that I selected was one that I specifically looked for because I wanted to see if there was new research out there about motor skills, specifically gross motor skills. I'm really trying to look for research that is not just OT centric, but is really focused on things that pediatric physical therapists or pediatric SLPs or pediatric mental health counselors may be interested in learning about, because I really want this to be for a wide audience of pediatric therapists. So this week I was thinking about you physical therapists out there and OT too, and all of us who work with kids who have motor skill challenges, right? And I found an article called Outdoor Activities and Motor Development in 2 to 7-year-old Boys and Girls. And it's a Finnish article. It was conducted in Finland, published in the Journal of Physical Education and Sport in 2021. And the purpose of this article was to find out if playing outdoors in a Nordic environment is associated with young children's motor competence. So they went into a lot of detail in this article about the Finnish outdoor environment. And if you don't know already, Finland has a huge value of the outdoors in their life. It is just part of the culture that they value outdoor play, outdoor life, like being outdoors as part of health and well-being for us as humans. And so in some ways, this article was really interesting to look at because for me, being in America, it was really interesting to read the article and compare how Finnish culture is very different than American culture, where we do value the outdoors. I mean, you see people outside all the time, right? Likely where you live, like enjoying parks and things like that. But there's a difference between just the way they think about children being outdoors. And this could be a whole other episode. But it was interesting in my mind as I was reading this article, thinking about how American parenting compares to parenting in Finland, where children are outdoors a lot more. So, okay, let's get back to the study. Sorry, I went on a little tangent there. So this article, I will be very honest with you, was very hard to digest because I had to read it a lot of times to really know what would be useful to communicate to you to apply to your work with children as a pediatric therapist. So I'm just going to talk through what they did and to help you understand why I was a little confused by this study. So the study design was that they conducted parent surveys of 1,136 children in 37 different randomly selected early childhood centers, which are 2 to 7-year-olds. That's the age range for these early childhood centers in Finland. And the parent surveys asked parents questions about behavior, outdoor play, and their child's participation in sports. Then the researchers went to those schools and measured children's motor skills, their locomotor skills, their movement skills, skipping, jumping, running, things like that, and object control, which is a fancy word in the test of gross motor development for ball skills, how they used a ball, throwing, catching, things like that, throwing at a target. So they used the test of gross motor development, the 3rd edition, as I said, and so they have the parent surveys, then they also have the test of gross motor development of the individual children at the centers. And then they also looked at the size and characteristics of the early childhood centers' yards, like the schoolyards. And then they took all of this data that they had and they used a hierarchical linear regression model to measure associations in the data. So don't feel bad if you don't know what that is. I'm in a PhD program and I literally had to type into Google, remind me again what a hierarchical linear regression model is, because the statistics class I took for my PhD was literally the only class in my entire life where I had to hire a private tutor. My brain does not work in statistics. So if you don't know what that is, part of the reason I'm doing these little 2-minute takeaways, or this will be 10-minute takeaway, that still sounds cute, right? Like nice little alliteration there. Alliteration? What is that called? Alliteration, when it's 2-minute takeaway, 10-minute takeaway. So part of the reason I'm doing these 2-minute takeaways is because I want you to not be afraid of the research, and I want you to be easily able to take the research and know that what you're doing in your nature-based practice is research-based, okay? So what I want to say here is that they were measuring associations in the data. This is to explain relationships between different data. This is not determining causation, okay? So this study was not an experimental study that proved that one thing causes another thing. All they're looking at is association or correlations in the data. So we need to keep that in mind when I talk about the findings now. So the findings were really interesting, and there's one that completely perplexed me, and I don't understand. It goes against everything I think, and I don't have an explanation for it. So I'll try to give my thoughts, and maybe y'all can give your thoughts too in the Therapy in the Great Outdoors group on this podcast episode, because I don't know how to explain some of these findings. So, okay. The first finding that was really interesting was that children in metropolitan areas, like large cities, played outdoors less and had the lowest motor skill scores, even though they participated the most in organized sports. So that is a truly interesting finding to me. We have to be careful about what we assume from one research study, right? But it's really interesting. Well, what's not surprising is that children in large cities play outdoors less, but it is surprising that they had lower motor skill scores, even though they participated the most in organized sports. So that's an interesting finding. Maybe that finding, in my thinking about it, is that organized sports tend to be, you practice a few times a week, like 2 times a week, right? You go to soccer practice or whatever. While if you have access to the outdoors around your home, which is what they found, that the kids in rural areas or smaller towns played outdoors more and had higher motor skill scores, even though they didn't participate the most in organized sports. So an explanation of this could be that if you have nature around your house, right, if you have access to the outdoors and you're playing outdoors more, maybe you're getting more practice of motor skills because sports are organized, right? They happen kind of like therapy does, honestly, y'all. Therapy is one of those things that, like, if we're doing a 1 time a week session with a kid, the impact that can have versus something they have access to over time, all the time, every day, like if kids have access to outdoor spaces to play, like, it's just interesting, right, to think about why is that? And that could be it, that organized sports are kind of a structured 2 to 3 times a week when the outdoors is accessible all the time. So these kids that live with more access to the outdoors have higher motor scores, and that could be why. Okay, the study didn't say all this. It's just what I'm thinking. One of the things I did not like about this study, when I said earlier, as I was describing this, like there were some things that confused me, is the study had a few grammatical errors in it. Now, I usually give grace for that when I read a study, because if something is translated from a different language into English, like I actually am more looking at the study itself rather than if there are a few grammatical errors because it was translated into English from a different language. And this one clearly seemed to be. But one of the things that was hard in this study was like it just was really short, and that I wanted more detail. I wanted them to go into more detail, kind of like I just did thinking about the results. So that was my own thoughts about why maybe that was part of the finding, but they didn't put that in the article. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, number 2, findings. The larger yards at early childhood centers were correlated with children having better ball skills. So that is something that makes sense, right? If there's more space for children to catch and throw and play ball games, they would have better ball skills because they have exposure to that during their school day. Number 3, fewer surfaces at early childhood centers were correlated with better movement skills. Okay, y'all, this is the one I cannot wrap my brain around. I do not understand this. I do not understand something that I often value in nature-based practice is that children have the opportunity to move their bodies. As far as gross motor skill development goes, they have the opportunity to move their bodies across uneven surfaces, right? Rocks and tree roots and grass and hills and creek beds and even walking through water. There's so many different opportunities for children to move their bodies in different ways when we're out in nature. And so this finding that fewer surfaces at the early childhood centers were correlated with better movement skills just did not make sense to me. The only comment they made on this in the study was, interestingly, fewer surfaces. And that part of the study was one of them that had kind of a little grammatical. It was confusing to read in English. So I'm not sure, they said it twice. So it's just interesting, right? That sometimes research reveals things that we don't know how to explain. I initially thought maybe could that be that they practice the certain motor skills that were tested on the test of gross motor development more because they have a flat surface on the playground. Like, let's say they have a flat surface and they have some wood chips or something like that. then maybe they have more opportunity on the playground to practice running and jumping. I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know if balance itself was specifically measured in this assessment, in the test of gross motor development that they use. So, it's just a really interesting finding. It's an interesting finding that fewer surfaces were correlated with better locomotor movement skills. Number 4, parents' views on their children's motor skills and their enjoyment of physical activities were correlated with children's better movement skills. So this one to me was also a little perplexing because I'm like, well, obviously, if parents see their children as being competent at motor skills and they rate their children as enjoying physical activities, then those would naturally mean that a child probably has better movement skills. But they seem to kind of imply in their interpretation of this that the social environment that children are in really impacts their ability to take risks and try new things, which I thought was an interesting observation. And then finally, I put as number 5 on the findings here that I wanted to discuss that results should really be interpreted with caution because, as I said, this study was conducted in one country with a culture that highly values outdoor play and outdoor life. And more research is needed in other countries and cultures to further explore the associations between, what's available on the schoolyard and outdoor play and a child's motor skills. So the takeaways for us that directly apply to our nature-based work with children. Let's go into those, and then we will wrap up. So the first one is that outdoor play may be correlated with better motor skills. And I say may because I want to be very careful about citing this research and then saying that it's correlated. This study seems to suggest that outdoor play may be correlated with better motor skills. That's a takeaway from this research. So if you are a pediatric physical therapist or maybe an OT who works with children on their motor skills, it is a clear finding of this study that children who played outdoors more had better motor skills on the test of gross motor development. So that is evidence-based practice to take our work out into nature with children. Okay. Number 2 takeaway is that children in urban and city settings may need more opportunities for outdoor play and connection to nature. So that was something that didn't surprise me in this study, but definitely is something that we should be thinking about increasing access to children who may lack opportunities to play outdoors. I know that as therapists, all of us want accessibility of everything for kids. We want kids to have opportunities, right? All children, we want them to have opportunities to connect with nature. And so maybe thinking about ways in our programs that we can bring children from urban and city settings into connection with nature in any way we can in our programs. Okay, number 3 on the takeaways are that larger spaces offered opportunities for ball skills to develop. So thinking about the space in which you have your outdoor services, this was a correlation they found in this study. And so finding larger spaces to give children time for that free play to develop ball skills kind of naturally as they have those larger spaces. And finally, the parents' positive attitudes towards physical activity may create a social environment that encourages children to try new skills. So the power of the parents' positive attitude is how I'm thinking of that. Knowing that as nature-based pediatric therapists, we need to be bringing parents into the process and really helping them to know how to best support their child in risky play, things that may be challenging for them if they do have challenges with gross motor skills. And also, I want to just close by saying more research is needed, as always, to explore the influence of outdoor play on the development of children's motor skills in early childhood. So that is it for today. Let's see how long this recording was. Oh my goodness, it's 18 minutes already, so I will wrap it up here. That was much longer than a 10-minute takeaway, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can see how that was kind of a challenging article to try to do a quick 2-minute takeaway on. I've been making little 2-minute takeaway reels as well, so this one will be a real challenge to figure out how to cram it into a short 60-second reel. So we'll see how that goes next week when I do it. So I want to thank you so much for listening. If you are listening for the first time, please, please, please share this. Please rate us. Please give all the love to the podcast because I want to get this news out to other pediatric therapists about the magic of nature-based therapy and how we can all be getting more children outdoors connecting with nature for their health and well-being. Thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, exploring therapy in the great outdoors. If you liked what you heard in this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes so we can share the magic of nature-based therapy with a wider audience of therapists who work with children who desperately need connection to nature nowadays, just like we do. If you're ready to take the next step in this adventure, join our free Therapy in the Great Outdoors community at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. The TGO community is a private space just for nature-based pediatric practitioners. We have loads of resources there to support you as you start or grow a nature-based practice or program. Our free TGO community has a discussion forum, a jobs and volunteers board, a crowdsourced treatment activities section, as well as free video trainings, research article reviews, and book recommendations from yours truly. Head on over to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com to join today. So until next time, get outside, connect, reflect, and enjoy the business and practice of therapy in the great outdoors.